Recessions also roll back small businesses, or smaller businesses. They don't have to necessarily be small. It's smaller than the big giant. You see newspaper chains getting eaten up by super giant newspaper chains getting eaten up by media conglomerates until there's about, what, 6 left now around the world, so in the Western world. So the big companies tighten their grip on their particular industry. Look what happened when all these companies, Citibank, AIG, and all these others, got all these hundreds of billions of dollars handed out to them, hand out money. What did they do? They didn't use it for credit. That doesn't make, if I give you a pile of money, that doesn't mean you're gonna hand it out for credit. As they said it, they explained it. They said, we don't give money out until we have qualified borrowers. So that money, instead of giving it to these banks, you should have been giving it to the people whose houses were losing their houses or losing their jobs. That would have stimulated the economy. That's the real economy. So what do they do with the money? They won't tell us. They've taken it. We do know that they've gone out and they bought other smaller banks, bought up banks to concentrate and tighten their grip over other competitors. That's one of the first things they think about. After they deal with the workers and after they flummox the consumers, then they turn, not in that sequence, just as urgently they turn to their competitors. As Marx said, one capitalist will kill many capitalists. That's a self-devouring system. How much time I got left? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? More?
As much as you want.
Oh boy. About that guy after me. What did you shout me? Didn't finish till 11:30. I'm almost.
Just keep going, Michael, man.
Now it is true that besides poverty, we did have a period of prosperity that many people hadn't imagined. It comes as a surprise, but the United States was, well into the 20th century, a third world country. Massive underemployment, poverty, slums, deprivation, people dying of tuberculosis, malnutrition, the diseases of the poor. That was going on, and that was the free market. And people said, well, we never really tried the free market. Oh, yes, we did. 1900, we had the free market. Fiorello LaGuardia, 1920s, went into New York City, and he said, I hadn't imagined there were people living in such terrible, terrible conditions and such poverty. Now, what happened? Well, we got an incredible boom, a period of prosperity, which I would say roughly is 1947 to 1980, when Reagan came in and started rolling it back. 1947 to 1980. Now, working people during World War II were expecting a depression to come back after World War II, and that was a good expectation. They had lived through this depression. My own family was a working class Italian-American family. They lived through the Depression. I used to hear about this thing called the Depression, like some ogre looking on us, hanging over our house somewhere with the Depression. World War II came along, and my Uncle Nick, who used to make $30 a week, which was good money then as an auto mechanic, now went into the defense factory because there were no more, they weren't building any more automobiles or anything on the road anymore. But anyway, went to the defense factory, and he's making $80, $90 a week, 100, 110 with overtime. Do you know what that amount was like in those days? The only problem was that there was nothing to spend it on. Nobody was building new houses, there were no new cars, there were no new refrigerators. Everything was going into what was called the war, right? So World War II ends, and I remember my uncle and my father saying, we're going to have 10 million young men come back out of uniform, pour in. Where are the jobs going to be? What's going to happen? The government won't be spending money the way they're spending it now. It's going to be a crash. It's going to be a worse depression. That isn't what happened. What happened was that Congress created this remarkable piece of legislation called the GI Bill of Rights, which 7 million young men job market. They went to school, and they had stipends. Not like the GI Bill today. The GI Bill has been subverted. So people come back from Iraq, and they want to say, oh, now I get a chance to go to college, and they find it doesn't cover all their tuition. They find they've got to get a part-time job. They find they've got to take out student loans with the GI Bill. It's nothing. It's a sham now. It's the old ploy that the right-wing reactionaries have been following for years in this country, which is you don't exactly wipe out the program, you keep the husk of the program, the facade, and you just gut it. That's all. You just drain it. You just defund it a little at a time. Okay, but in 1945, 46, 47, you had the GI Bill of Rights, and that through the exploitation of talent and energies, people come out who could be accountants and engineers and scientists and lawyers and doctors and teachers and all that sort of thing. It was an amazing boost. The other thing is, my Uncle Nick came out of World War II. He wasn't in the Army, as I said, he was in the defense plant. And he had this pile of money. There was an enormous pile of money that people made, pretty good salaries they made, working for the war effort, with nothing to spend it on. And so after World War II, there was this enormous demand, and housing started coming, and the cars were coming out and rolling, and the highway bill and all that, and that was it. And the other thing, of course, was you still had a lot of the New Deal programs that were a good cushion and a countervailing force against recession. And you had a very large military budget, not as big as it was during the war, but moving much higher than it had been in the 1920s or 30s. So given all those things, we've got this explosion of prosperity and there was a kind of prosperity. There were all sorts of working people who now were living what they felt were the middle class American dream. They had a little house, a ticky-tack, in a housing development, but it was a house. It was their own house, and they had a car, and their kid was going to the state university, and this was like a real change. And that involved millions of people. And that's where we got all that stuff about America, the prospect of America. Herbert Marcuse saying, capitalism delivers the goods. We got to admit it, they really deliver the goods. If you hamstring them and you get them in certain kind of odd historical moments and you pour billions in, it looks like they deliver the goods. That's gone now. That is being rolled back now. Millions still enjoy, to some extent, a better standard than in earlier generations. But we're moving, with enough Republican administrations, we're moving closer and closer back to that third world status. Thousands of people dying because they can't afford to see a doctor. The old diseases of the poor are coming back, tuberculosis and various other things like that. And America is beginning again to resemble a third world country. To the extent that some material security extends to working people, it's not because of free market capitalism, but despite it. It is due to democratic struggle in the political realm and struggle at the point of production. It's ironic that to the extent that modern capitalist systems have any human features, it's kind of ironic. To the extent that this system is livable and bearable, it's because of the struggles waged by popular non-capitalist and often anti-capitalist working class and other anti-capitalist ideological forces that fight for the social wage and for decent earnings and for an expansion of political democracy.